State of reality.
Do you need another?
You're like, it's actually better.
Yep.
Yep. Come on. I think that's the... Yeah. Although
You don't want to cover the shirt.
we did a casting. Oh, sorry.
Classic blunder.
I mean, the control. It is. And a lot of, especially guys.
This tent was out. Just partying.
I too will follow suit and do just let it play in your head. Doesn't look as good as in front of the
Press nose.
Totally. It doesn't. Yeah. So, good question while you're
Yeah.
no. Do you know when your boss is going to get here?
She's supposed to get here in the next 3 minutes.
Okay, Pramila has a flight on at 9. Yeah, who was
Okay.
No, who was just
Yeah, she's the third speaker right after Tlaib.
Okay. Do you need another?
Yeah. This
One definitely is. This one definitely is.
You should. You can all the way down from the back. Yeah, right. Yeah, they have a different.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I just got this hot coffee.
That was incredible. And the little hat, I loved it. I was absolutely I got extravaganza, and you all were fabulous. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. I'm so glad I brought my sunglasses. The head yeah.
That would have been a great.
Yeah, we all.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, let's get in front of the camera.
Oh
yeah, do it. Let's like dive in. Oh, the sun. You wanna switch? You okay?
Yeah, I'll be fine. Just don't look out.
Brad, I was like, gotta stand back to you guys. I counted them. I counted everybody. Oh, I think my friend Hannah. Okay, so this video's Jayapal. Yeah, and Hannah's roommate.
And the others know they're coming here.
It's all. Yeah.
Prove, if not now, guys.
Sarah, good to meet you. I think Mike should come back here.
Here we are.
From New York?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Even seeing you.
So good to see you. Thank you for doing this. Always. How are you?
Every time I see you, you look different, okay? I don't know what's wrong.
Hey, how are you? Thank you.
I saw Rashida. I just saw her.
I know. I was
like, I know I saw her somewhere.
And you have to. Okay, got it. Got it. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, you're third. You're third. Okay.
I'm on
Okay.
the co-conspirator exception I'm
Okay. Oh, okay, you're good.
801 BDC.
We're gonna get started, folks. Good morning, everyone. And I am a true believer that joy is an act of resistance, which is why you hear today we are joyfully and clear and grounded of why we're here. We know that justice could never wait. And so I want to first start by letting you know that my name is Congresswoman Delia Catalina Ramirez. And we are here today because we have a mission to uphold our shared humanity, our duty to fight for our civil rights, and the responsibility to stand up for the people of Illinois 3rd Congressional District and every single district represented here and the entire country. Making sure that we are clear that no wannabe dictators can ever silence us, and we will continue to speak up always for justice. It is why we are here today, and we are saying loudly so that that Capitol and every House building hears it. Free Mahmoud Khalil. Mahmoud Khalil. And it is clear that Mahmoud is a dedicated father, a husband, a friend, a student, and a community leader. He is loved and respected by many. He deserves to be home with his wife, preparing for the arrival of his child. But let's put aside that for a moment. Mahmoud is also a resident of the United States of America, a legal permanent resident. And as such, he is protected by our Constitution and afforded the right to free speech and due process. If that is true, not about who he is, but about who we are, or at least who we're supposed to be, that makes what we are seeing happen right now in front of our eyes chilling. We are a nation that passionately defends our basic constitutional rights of free speech and due process, and those rights are essential to who we are and how we sustain a democracy and resist wannabe dictators. It is why we know that we must continue to speak up, and we continue to be able to demonstrate dissent in the time of injustice. But Donald Trump and his loyalists are waging war on our rights and using an authoritarian playbook to punish resistance and silence those who would dare to dissent. And they may try to make an example of Mahmoud Khalil, but they are not stopping with him. In detaining immigration advocates like Jeanette Vizquera, Trump and Republicans are looking to silence every single voice from every corner of our movement that stands against them, the racist white nationalist agenda. And so we must see the connections between their actions and expose them for what they are, their actions of an authoritarian. Trump will continue challenging and eroding each of our constitutionally protected rights in his pursuit of power. They've come for immigrants, they've come for Palestinian voices, and they will come for anyone who dares to uphold our shared humanity and challenge this agenda. So every time they come for us, folks, we must rise up. Every time they try to knock us down and make an example of us, we must stand against it. We must not be silent to protect our constitutional rights, to protect each other, to protect our multiracial, multicultural democracy. And it is why today we are standing here on this Tuesday to say that we demand that Mahmoud Khalil be free. We demand justice for him, and we demand it right now. With us today is a number of leaders from all over the country, but also some of my colleagues that work for justice every single day in these halls of Congress. Help me welcome Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib.
Thank you all so much for being here. I know that Mahmoud Khalil right now is a political prisoner. We are demanding his release, of course, today. Mahmoud was kidnapped from his home by government agents and illegally disappeared to a detention facility in Louisiana. We know that that's thousands of miles away from his wife. They're expecting their first child. But as his wife Noor would say, she's more than just an 8 months pregnant woman. She's also just a human being that watched, again, her love, her husband being ripped away from her in front of her with if you saw the video, it was horrifying to watch. Felt so incredibly helpless. You know, there was no due process, no criminal charges, no demonstration of a warrant, no information on where he was being held for days. Let's be clear. Mahmoud's rights are our rights. In the United States of America, no matter your immigration status, no matter, again, who you are, you have constitutional rights in our country. The detention and threatened deportation of Mahmoud is illegal and is a direct assault on our constitutional rights to due process. freedom of speech, a right to protest, and on dissent itself. Dissent is a fundamental American value. This is a moment that should alarm all of us. If we do not stand up and fight for Mahmoud's freedom today, the lawless Trump administration will come for us all. All of our rights are under attack at this moment. But Mahmoud knows that the Israeli government imprisons Palestinians without charge or trial every single day, just like what our government just did to Mahmoud. As Mahmoud himself said in his powerful letter from ICE detention, he was targeted for exercising his right to freedom of speech, to advocate for a free Palestine and end Israel's occupation and apartheid and genocide in Gaza. The Trump administration proudly admits that admits this clearly and threatened to do more arrests. We are already seeing other students, and Congresswoman Ramirez talked about that. Scholars are being targeted. You know, I heard the other day, another professor, another student. And it's unfortunate some of these universities are helping the Trump administration. You know, including right here, we saw a person, again, being targeted and detained here in DC at Georgetown. These attacks are an attempt to silence the growing movement for human rights for Palestinians. They want us to be silent as the Israeli government continues its genocide, wiping out entire generations of Palestinian families, dropping American bombs on hospitals, and dismembering children over and over again. They want us to be silent as Trump sends Netanyahu another $12.5 billion in new weapons to ethnically cleanse Palestinians. I know Mahmoud has called students and advocates and elected officials like us to unite and defend the right to protest for Palestine. And that's exactly what we're here to do. You don't have to agree everything that Mahmoud is saying, but you have to agree that the one thing that we understand is the freedom of speech and our constitutional rights. And we're here to say that we will not be silent. Free Mahmoud Khalil. And as the only Palestinian American serving in this Congress, I must always say, free Palestine. With that, I'm going to have my amazing colleague, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, and let me tell you, she's been an incredible mentor in this fight. You know, she knows it's not just about freedom of speech when it comes to the issue of Palestine. We know it's also about immigrant rights. It's also about us fighting against the corporate greed that has infiltrated our government already, with billionaires making decisions about Medicaid and Social Security. And so I'm just really pleased and so incredibly grateful that she's on the Judiciary Committee. Her leadership is needed at this moment. With that, Pramila.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Tlaib, for your incredible courage, your voice, your leadership. Thank you, Congresswoman Ramirez, and all of the people who are here and across the country who are speaking out on this issue. I want to be very clear. What the Trump administration is doing to Mahmoud Khalil is unconstitutional. Full stop. It is also the beginning of a chilling war on the free speech rights of every single person in America, and Trump's mass deportation plans are the beginning of this war. Let me also be clear that the fundamental First Amendment right to free speech means that no matter how you feel about any particular issue, no one, not the President of the United States, not campus administrators, not regular people, has the right to stop you from protesting and speaking your mind on any particular issue. Mahmoud Khalil did nothing other than stand up for what he believed was right. He inspired others through political advocacy. He stood up and raised his voice when he saw a great injustice happening. And whether you agree or not, that is his constitutional right. To use an antiquated Cold War era provision that is in the Immigration and Nationality Act, and I serve as the top Democrat on the Immigration Subcommittee, to use that provision to arrest and detain him simply because the Trump administration didn't agree with him is unlawful. And his case is only the beginning of the stripping of basic constitutional protections. This is the playbook of authoritarians and dictators. It is outrageous that Mahmoud Khalil, who is a lawful permanent resident of the United States, a green card holder, married to a U.S. citizen, has been shipped off to an ICE, an Immigration and Customs Enforcement detention facility in Louisiana, more than 1,000 miles from his home in New York. And while this crackdown may be beginning with pro-Palestinian protesters and immigrants of all legal statuses, that is not where it will end. Trump and administration are going after anyone who objects to his agenda. I am so proud that on March 14th, I and more than 100 of my House colleagues were on a letter condemning the arrest of Mahmoud Khalil and the use of this antiquated immigration law to go after non-citizens exercising their rights. None of us will stop fighting until we get answers and until Mahmoud is home with his wife where he belongs, and until we ensure the free speech rights of everyone in this country. Every single American should understand that what is happening to one person can happen to them. And Trump's undermining of Mahmoud's free speech rights undermines the rights of us all. We will not let it stand. And now it's a great honor to turn it over to somebody who's been a champion in the field of constitutional rights, my friend, the Executive Director of the Center for Constitutional Rights, Vince Warren.
Good morning. My name is Vince Warren. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Constitutional Rights, and our organization, along with the ACLU, CLEAR, and numerous other lawyers, represents Mahmoud Khalil in this terrible journey that he has found himself on. And let's be clear about what the rule of law, the state of the rule of law in this country is right now. This administration is saying that just because someone criticizes foreign policy makes them subject to deportation regardless almost of their immigration status. That makes it so that immigration is the fig leaf. That is the excuse. What is really actually happening is that this administration is punishing people that speak out against it. There are many people in this country that disagree with what this administration is doing. Do they intend to arrest us all? Do they intend to deport us all? No. What they want to do is they want to focus on the people that are the least, that have the least protection, that are the most vulnerable, and pretend that the Constitution doesn't apply to them. Well, friends, I'm here to tell you that the Constitution most certainly does apply to them. And ironically enough, this administration is creating a situation that is the exact opposite of why people decided to come to this country. Across this nation, there are people that have come to the United States because they were fleeing authoritarian regimes. They were fleeing administrations that would totally unplug their infrastructure. They were fleeing administrations that were doing attacks on civil societies. They were fleeing administrations that were punishing people just because they disagreed with the government. Well, guess what? They are now here in the United States, and the United States is living out its worst nightmare of what the rule of law should look like. I want to say very clearly that Mahmoud has sent messages to us all. He's got a wonderful, wonderful letter, which I encourage you to read. But we should also be clear that this is not a regular deportation proceeding. What this is an attempt at disappearance. Again, something that happens routinely in authoritarian countries, and it is happening right here. If it were not for the lawyers that were able to file a habeas corpus petition in the wee hours in the morning after we found out that Mahmoud was taken, the courts wouldn't even know about it. And if it wasn't for the lawyers that once the administration decided to transfer Mahmoud 1,000 miles away in the hopes that the law wouldn't, the habeas corpus petition wouldn't reach him, it was the lawyers that got an order from the judge to bring Mahmoud back closer to home. It is also the lawyers that got the judge to issue an order that says that Mahmoud shall not be deported until he has his due process here. I'm not trying to make the lawyers the heroes, but I am saying to all of the people, if we rely just on the law, to be able to vindicate the full rights that we have in our country, we're always going to be subject to the whims of an authoritarian regime, because their game plan is to move the law aside. They're criminalizing judges. They're coming up with specious, unprecedented rules as to why they say people should be able to be deported. They're pushing back on law firms and saying that law firms can't represent people. What does that add up to? that adds up to a key piece of the authoritarian game plan that says the first thing we do is kill the lawyers, and then we can do whatever we want. It's up to everybody to make sure that that doesn't happen. So I'm very happy to say here that we are standing for freedom. We are standing for Mahmoud. We need to free him now. We've got a bail application that's pending in front of the court. He needs to be released, and he needs to be not an example of what happens in our worst moments. He needs to be, as a human being, needs to be an example of what happens when we live up to the promise of the rights and freedom that we are fighting for in this country. Thank you. And with that, I'm very happy to give it to Greg Casar, Congressman Greg Casar, to give some remarks.
Good morning. I'm Greg Casar. I'm proud to represent the heart of Texas in the United States Congress and to be chairman of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. For the freedom of speech, we must free Mahmoud Khalil. For the freedom of assembly, we must free Mahmoud Khalil. For the founders of this country and the framers of our Constitution, we must free Mahmoud Khalil. Today's press conference is certainly about Mr. Khalil, and this is also about the rights of all Americans. In this country, all people are supposed to be free to express their views without fear of being punished by the government. Everyone should be able to speak up and say just what it is they think non-violently without being worried that the government is going to surveil you, follow you, come to your house, and arrest you. It should not matter if your views are left or right, popular or unpopular. The freedom to speak up is a fundamental American right. And I want, as the Progressive Caucus chair, for conservatives at home, independents at home, people with right-wing views at home know that we should work together to make sure that no matter what your views are, that you should be allowed to speak out without the government sending its law enforcement for you or your family. Mahmoud Khalil was a legal permanent resident who was targeted for his political activism. The administration targeting people for detention based on their political views should send a chill down the spine of every single American. This administration's plans will not end with Mr. Khalil. They will target activists who speak out about the plundering of taxpayer dollars by billionaires. They will target those whistleblowers who speak out about the incompetence that we see within this administration. Make no mistake, this administration does not care about people's everyday security. They just were exposed for planning an international bombing campaign via text message. So this administration is more focused on cutting your Social Security to hand tax breaks out to billionaires, more focused on cutting your health care to hand tax breaks out to billionaires, more focused on firing veterans and taking their salaries for themselves so that they can get billions of dollars more in corporate contracts. And when people speak out against injustice at home or abroad, when they speak out about the killings in Gaza, when they speak out about war, we should make sure that those people can speak their views, whether they agree with me or not. I mean, just think about the moment we're in for a moment as a country. I'm sure many people at home, you've got kids that will eventually be in college. When someone's in college, don't you want them to be able to speak out, speak their views, protest, assemble, and not be worried that your child could be targeted by the federal government? No administration should be allowed to do that. And before this year, we felt that we were in a country where that was not going to happen. Well, that is exactly what's happening. And it is up to members of Congress, but actually ultimately the people, to stop it, because the people in our Constitution are the ultimate check and balance on government abuse. I'll say it one more time. We're in a country right now where federal law enforcement that is supposed to be keeping us safe from violence and harm is being sent to follow, arrest, and disappear people from this country just because they disagree with the administration politically. That's horrifying. That's something that we think of happening in other countries. but that's happening here today. So for the freedom of speech, we must free Mahmoud Khalil. For the freedom of assembly, we must free Mahmoud Khalil. And for the freedom that live in a country that abides by its constitution, we should free Mahmoud Khalil. Thank you. And next, we are going to hear from Mike Zamora at the ACLU. Thanks so much.
Morning, I'm Mike Zamora with the ACLU. I want to thank the representatives for their strong leadership. And I want to be clear that Mahmoud Khalil was taken from his home, from his wife, for one reason and one reason only. And it's because the federal government did not agree with what he was saying. It doesn't matter what pretext they may come up with after the fact. This is a clear violation of Mr. Khalil's First Amendment rights. But let's also be clear that it's not only an attack on Mr. Khalil or on students or on people with visas or lawful permanent residents. No, this is an attack on every single one of us. Because if any of us is free only to say or read or protest what the government approves of, then we don't live in a free country anymore. That's why there's only one acceptable outcome to this case, and that is to free Mahmoud Khalil. The ACLU and CCR and our excellent co-counsels will be carrying this fight in court to defend Mr. Khalil's First Amendment rights. But make no mistake, the fight to protect our rights cannot be waged only in court. We need everyone, legal organizations and members of Congress, sure, but everybody across society to rise up and defend the First Amendment. And I know it takes courage. Mr. Khalil's case proves the point. It shows the risks of speaking out when the government is determined to punish speech. But that's exactly the point, right? They're trying to bully us into complying with the regime-sanctioned point of view. And if they're successful, then our free speech rights are really just an empty husk. There's plenty of people who have come before us to defend rights, to stand up and show the courage to fight for rights that have been denied. We know what that looks like. And now it's our turn. So whether you're in Congress or the courtroom, whether you're in corporate America or on a college campus, we need all of us to stand together in this. All of us need to show the courage to defend the First Amendment and to defend our freedom. Thank you.
Mike said it perfectly. It's going to take every one of us in this precise moment to come together and understand that our liberation is intertwined in the liberation of each other. Yes, it's going to take the courts, and I'm so grateful for our civil society who's taking on this fight for our constitutional rights. Yes, it's going to take members of Congress, and it's going to take more than 100 of us. Every single member of Congress who took an oath to protect our Constitution should be saying, free Mahmoud Khalil right now. And it's also going to take our organizations, our community leaders, and every resident around this country to ask themselves, are we at a make or break moment for our Constitution, for our First Amendment rights? And what will we do about it? Because the reality is that while they have taken Mahmoud Khalil, they have also taken others already. You heard Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib talk about Cornell University. We're seeing it in Georgetown University. We certainly have seen someone else at Columbia University. We're seeing immigration advocates also being taken by this precise government that will not allow anyone to speak against injustice if they can get away with it. But today, I think it's important that we say, we will not let them get away with it. Not today, not tomorrow, and not ever. Today is a moment for every one of us watching to ask ourselves, what will we do to protect freedom of speech? What will we do in this precise moment to stand for justice? When you have a government that has now decided that we are the biggest threat to his authoritarian agenda, to his white supremacist agenda, to the injustice that says that some are Americans and others are not, to this idea that some have constitutional rights and others do not. This is a critical moment for this nation, but it is also a moment to mobilize like we've never seen before. And so today, we stand at a press conference. Later, we'll be at a protest. Later, we'll be at actions. And for every person watching, if your member of Congress has not spoken against this injustice, then you call him and ask him, what are you doing to free Mahmoud Khalil today? With that, I'll take some questions.
Congresswoman, you and Congressman Casar talked about the need for all members of Congress to deal with free speech. Made an explicit call to members on the other side of the aisle to think more about the larger ramifications here in play. But what can you do to kind of bring people together on this? We haven't seen as much willingness to talk about this issue on the right, including from people who presented themselves as sort of free speech absolutists in the last administration.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you've realized is that freedom of speech is only convenient when it works for a particular group of people. The number of my colleagues I have heard in committee and at protests and rallies saying all sorts of things to the previous administration. Can you imagine if the previous administration would have said, we're going to criminalize your dissent? We're going to detain you, we're going to persecute you. And I think it's really important, as Congressman Casar just said, that we are very clear about what's happening here. This president is saying, if you dare to question what I am doing, God forbid if you dare to be a person of color, but if you dare to question what I am doing, I will hunt you down, persecute you, and imprison you. That is what we see in this precise moment. And for anyone that has ever bragged about how, at least in this country, we can speak up against injustice, for those of us that have said, well, we are the country that demonstrates democracy to other countries, we have to be very clear that our very own democracy is on the line. Mahmoud Khalil is a clear example of what is happening around this country, where they dare to criminalize dissent. And it's exactly why I think for every single person in this country who values freedom of speech, to those veterans that fought for that freedom of speech, we should all come together and say, what's happening here impacts all of us.
If I can follow up, you've also talked a lot about the need for people to be more vocal, to be more outspoken. What recourse would you like to see in Congress to be done here? I know it's hard because you guys are in the minority party, but what actions do you think that Congresswomen like yourself should be taking to kind of advance these issues legislatively?
Yeah. Look, I think that every chance we get when we're in a committee hearing, we should be talking about this. Every time we're on the House floor, we should be using our 5 minutes or 1 minute or special order hour to talk about what's happening to Mahmoud Khalil and how it actually impacts everything we say we care about. It also means that we need more than 100 Democrats. Frankly, we should have every single Democrat signed on to letters, to statements, to resolutions to say, we protect freedom of speech. It doesn't matter who it is. And so I think for us in this precise moment, we should be asking ourselves, are members of Congress who took an oath to protect the Constitution doing everything we can to uphold that Constitution? And if we can't answer that, then we certainly have a lot more to do. Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, folks. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate your leadership.
I couldn't do it for more than 5 minutes.
Thank you for, yeah, that's right, thank you. Joyfully and clear and grounded of why we're here. We know that justice could never wait. And so I want to first start by letting you know that my name is Congresswoman Delia Catalina Ramirez, And we are here today because we have a mission to uphold our shared humanity, our duty to fight for our civil rights, and the responsibility to stand up for the people of Illinois 3rd Congressional District and every single district represented here and the entire country. Making sure that we are clear that no wannabe dictators can ever silence us, and we will continue to speak up always for justice. It is why we are here today, and we are saying loudly so that that Capitol and every House building hears it. Free Mahmoud Khalil. Mahmoud Khalil. And it is clear that Mahmoud is a dedicated father, a husband, a friend, a student, and a community leader. He is loved and respected by many. He deserves to be home with his wife, preparing for the arrival of his child. But let's put aside that for a moment. Mahmoud is also a resident of the United States of America, a legal permanent resident, and as such, he is protected by our Constitution and afforded the right to free speech and due process. If that is true, not about who he is, but about who we are, or at least who we're supposed to be, that makes what we are seeing happen right now in front of our eyes chilling. We are a nation that passionately defends our basic constitutional rights of free speech and due process, and those rights are essential to who we are and how we sustain a democracy and resist wannabe